We're continuing, in James chapter 4 this morning, going to finish up chapter 4. Looking to the future. There are two reasons why people want to know the future. Throughout the history of mankind, in every culture, there have been some sort of medium or soothsayer or fortune teller or astrologist or stockbroker who everyone turns to predict the future. Whether they're rolling dice or bones or sticks, reading palms, people want to know what's ahead. For one of two reasons. Either they're afraid of what's to come, or they want to use what's to come to their advantage. In the end, it's about control. They want to know the future so that they can control the outcomes. Either so that they can build themselves up, or they're afraid of what will happen to them. Both ultimately show a lack of understanding or trust in who God is. In Isaiah 46, verses 9 and 10, God said, "I am God and there is no other. I am God and there is no one like me, declaring the end from the beginning, and from ancient times, things which have not yet been done, saying, my purpose will be established, and I will accomplish all my good pleasure." The reason why God says there is no one like me is because no one knows the future. No one can set the future. No one can control the future. No one is in control of their own destiny to make their pleasures happen. Their desires to make sure that they come to fruition. God is the only God. God is the only one, and there is no one like him because God is the only one who controls the future. Those who look to control the future for their own advancement are simply serving themselves and ultimately lose sight of God's plans for them. And when things don't work out, they become bitter, they become angry, blaming God for not allowing their plans to come to fruition. Those who fear the future don't trust in God's plans for them, becoming controlled by what might be rather than allowing God to work his good plans for them. In the end, those who are consumed by the future often fail to act now in the way that God has commanded, allowing either their pride, their selfishness, or their fear to drive their actions. In James chapter 4, we've been looking at the proof of genuine faith, dealing primarily with the issue of pride versus humility. That genuine saving faith will live with a humility before God in our desires, the pleasures that wage war in our hearts. With our pride in how we look at others, judging them, standing over top of them, and now our pride of trying to control the future. The whole book of James has been looking at this proofs of faith. Are you humble enough, he asks, to trust God and his plans? The timeless truth for this morning, I have that one on the line, is the fact that genuine saving faith will humbly trust in God's plan for the future, seeking to serve him no matter the circumstances. Let's look at the passage for this morning. And we'll read starting in verse 6 all the way down to the end of the chapter so that we have the bigger context here. But he gives a greater grace. Therefore, it says, God is opposed to the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Submit, therefore, to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Be miserable, and mourn and weep. Let your laughter be turned into mourning, and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves in the presence of the Lord, and he will exalt you. Do not speak against one another, brethren. He who speaks against a brother or judges his brother speaks against the law and judges the law. But if you judge the law, you are not a doer of the law, but a judge of it. There is only one lawgiver and judge, the one who is able to save and to destroy. But who are you to judge your neighbor? Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to such and such a city and spend a year there and engage in business and make a profit. Yet you do not know what your life will be like tomorrow. You're just a vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes away. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and also do this or that. But as it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. Therefore, to the one who knows the right thing to do and does not do it, to him it is sin. Genuine saving faith will humbly trust in God's plan for the future, seeking to serve him no matter the circumstances. That's what we're looking at this morning. Controlling the future. James starts in verse 13 in this thought, saying, come now, you who say. It's almost a call of pity, almost sarcastic. All right, you who say, I'm going to go do this or that. This phrase actually isn't used very often in the New Testament, but it's got this idea of, you really think that you can say that you know the future? That you can lay out these plans, that we're going to go to this city, I'm going to engage in business in this way, I'm going to make money. I know how all of this is going to work out. James is calling out the arrogance, the pride of claiming to know how everything is going to unfold. No one can know all of the variables that are going to happen in life. This is why I don't believe in a lot of conspiracy theories. They get thrown around a lot today on the internet and wherever else. These ideas of the big cabal or the group of people who are running everything, and they make all of these plans and everything is laid out in this way for this outcome to reach this point. It's why I have a hard time with movies like Ocean's 11 or those kind of heists movies where there's this intricate plan where everything has to follow along this exact plan, one thing after another, after another, after another, and they're weeks or months in advance getting all of these things set. This stuff doesn't work. Because no matter how meticulous you are, no one can plan for all of the variables. You might have a general plan that you kind of work towards over time. I can agree with that. But there isn't this, deep 4D chess thing being worked out. No one's that smart. And if you're looking at the U.S. government right now, trying to see how they're working out all of these things, you're not paying close enough attention to who's actually in charge. No one can plan all of those things that meticulously. It is simply impossible. Only God can know the future with that level of certainty, because only God sets the future, controls it, puts it into motion. James here uses the example of a businessman who has everything planned out. Now, I recognize as farmers, ranchers, it's really hard to plan out everything that meticulously because nothing works like that. You know that better than most. But this is still the same idea, right? We live with so many people around us that have this idea. I'm gonna work for this long. I'm gonna get this promotion. I'm gonna invest in these sort of things so I can retire at 65 and I can live on the luxury of my investments. And that's it. That's the set. That's the goal. And they're set on it. Jesus warned about that mentality. In Luke 12, he told a parable of a rich man who was very productive. And he began to reason to himself, saying, "What shall I do, since I have no place to store all of my crops?" And he said, "This is what I will do. I'll tear down my barns and build larger ones. And there I'll store all my grain and my goods, and I will say to my soul, 'Soul, you have many goods laid up for the years to come. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool, this very night your soul will be required of you. And now who will own what you have prepared?' So is the man who stores up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God." Now, Jesus in that parable was warning about the worldliness of plans, but it's the same concept here that James is getting at. The businessman that's trying to lay out, no, I know exactly how everything is going to set. I have planned for everything. I know how things are going to turn out. James, almost in pity, says, "You do not know what your life is going to be like tomorrow. You cannot know what tomorrow brings. You may have an idea. We can see what the weather is supposed to be like tomorrow, but living in South Dakota, we also know that that doesn't mean anything. That the weatherman is usually a little off. You cannot know what tomorrow brings. It may be just like today. Things may work out just as you had planned, or everything might change in a moment. The cows get out, the field catches on fire, accidents, illnesses, the sin of other people. We have no idea what tomorrow brings. When some foreign despot decides, all right, let's just end it all and starts launching nukes. So many things so far out of our control. James is trying to put things in perspective. You don't know what your life will be like tomorrow. You are just a vapor. It's the word atmos. It's where we get the word atmosphere, a cloud, a breath. When you breathe out and it's cold outside and that little breath is visible and then it's just gone. That's all you are. You have no idea what tomorrow will bring, and you are here in a second and gone the next, like a breath on a cold morning. You may think you are the most important person that the world has ever known, but you are still going to be gone like a puff of smoke. It's a really encouraging thought, right? If you want to be even more encouraged, read Ecclesiastes. All of your wisdom dies with you. All of the fruits of your labors are enjoyed by somebody else. Everything you built will crumble into dust. Because time keeps marching on, and you are a vapor, a breath in the wind. James is making the point about our pride. We think we can plan for the future. We think we can set our legacy. We can put all of these things in motion. You don't know what tomorrow brings, and you're nothing but a breath in the wind. We need to have the right perspective about tomorrow, about ourselves. That doesn't mean that we don't plan. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and also do this or that. James is not saying that we don't plan for the future. The phrase, and I couldn't find it exactly, it's however you want to say it, but failing to plan is planning to fail. There are several proverbs that reach this sort of idea. Proverbs 16:3 says, "Commit your work to the Lord, and your plans will be established." In 15:22 it says, "Without counsel plans fail, but with many advisors they succeed." There are many other proverbs that go along this idea that we need to plan. We need to make sure that we're being wise about the future. We should be considerate and intentional with what God has invested in us. Our time, our energy, our money, our family, our job. We need to look at what tomorrow is likely to bring so that we can make the most out of what God has entrusted us with. Whether that is with our family, planning for their financial future, their security, whether that's with our church. How can we tomorrow, how can we a month from now, how can we 6 months from now be as effective as a church as possible? What can we set in place, what can we set in motion now that God may use in the future? We establish plans. But we do so not with the idea of this is how all things will work out, but rather, if God wills, this is the direction we think we should go. This is what we see as the best option as we march forward. And we're going to continue to look for God's will in our choices, in our actions, in our future. We plan for the most knowable future, trusting in God to work out what He designs. And asking is, in part of that, for the humility and for the trust to follow along when things don't quite go as we had intended. But no matter what, we need to be doing the right thing. Verse 17 does sometimes get treated as almost an afterthought, something separated from verses 13 to 16, but I don't think it should. I think James is making a very clear point here. This is not an afterthought. This is not and just do what you need to do. Do the right thing. This is specifically as we're looking at time. Looking at the day-to-day plans. To the one who knows the right thing to do and does not do it, to him it is sin. This is the idea of when our plans fall through. When the events of life don't go as we thought they would. Things happen to us that we either didn't plan for or couldn't plan for. No matter the circumstances, whether we plan for them or not, God has called us to a specific course of action. I believe in gray areas of life, but there are only black and white consequences. How can I best glorify God in this moment? People often separate out sins of commission and sins of omission. And that you have sins of commission. Those are the willful choices, things that we know we shouldn't do and yet we choose to do them. Sins of omission are kind of the opposite side. Things that we know we should do but we don't. In the end, it's the same thing. The one who knows the right thing to do and does not do it, to him it is sin. If you know what you're supposed to do and you choose not to do it, It's the same thing as knowing the wrong thing to do and doing it. When we're looking at the future, that's about tomorrow. Today, no matter what your plans may be, God has called you to a specific course of action. And if you know what you're supposed to be doing, then do it. Let tomorrow worry about itself. Serve God today the way He has called you to. This is especially true for those who fear the future. The one who looks to tomorrow, not with a desire to control it, not with a plan on which way they want to go, but rather who look at it with fear. And whose fear paralyzes them with anxiety or depression because of what tomorrow might bring. The fear may be real. The enemy at the gates. A disease that's only likely to get worse and worse. But no matter what the fear is, tomorrow is still tomorrow. And that does not excuse failure to follow God's command today. To the one who knows the right thing to do and does not do it, to him it is sin. To trust and to obey. To live in faith and in service. No matter what tomorrow may or may not bring. Genuine saving faith will humbly trust in God's plan for the future, seeking to serve Him no matter the circumstances. We plan for the future. We plan for tomorrow, trusting in God's plans. Trusting in His promise that He will use all things for the good of those who love Him. Even the things we may not have wanted. Even the things that hurt. If God had a better place for us to be, then that's where we'd be. Trusting that is about trusting in the future and His plans for us. As we look to the future, we do need to plan, but my first question for this morning is, what are the dangers in over-planning for the future?
Missing what God has available for you now. You're so busy planning for the future that you miss, what He has going on in the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Being so focused on tomorrow that you're missing what we're looking at today. I need to go this so that tomorrow we can have this, and this is set for tomorrow. And yet today has its own worries.
I think we can get so stuck in our plans that we get frustrated or disappointed, which leads us to sin against others, and so in planning, and it's just this domino effect, and we are so, when we're over planning, we get very attached to those plans, and then we don't react well when our plans don't go as planned.
There you go. We plan everything so completely, so utterly, and we become so attached to those plans that when they don't work out, we get angry, we get bitter, we get resentful.
And usually we try to, it's easy to essentially try to control it then. If we overplan all this, we're not allowing God to make His moves. It's like, this is the move that we need to do, and this is everything, because I'm controlling the outcome of everything. I know that that's, can be a struggle for myself, and probably wrapped in anxieties for the things, but just that controlling nature of it.
Yeah, absolutely. We become so wrapped up in our own plans, and I think you're right. It can come into either of those. It can either be a pride, no, this is how it has to work out, or it can be a fear. If things don't work exactly like this, then everything's going to fall apart. And there can be a fear or a pride that causes that. So what about the dangers in failing to plan for the future?
Find yourself in situations that you shouldn't probably have, just like not being responsible, I guess. Responsible with the resources that God has given you, or even relationships. You know, if you don't, since relationships take effort to maintain, they don't just happen. There's times where you're going to have to plan to make the relationships, like to maintain them. So you could end up with broken relationships if you're not thoughtful about it and plan. But also, like I said, the resource side of it, you don't plan your family's finances to some degree, that could be a problem. And so.
Yeah. Looking to relationships being intentional with those people, the damage that can come in that, and then the resources just not having enough or end up just kind of all over the place.
I think the other, and it just kind of addresses both of those. I think Patton said plans are useless, but planning is essential.
Yes.
And I think there's a lot of truth in that. I think that's in Proverbs too. They're going to add to the Bible. I think they should.
Yeah, or there's, I don't know if it was similar, a general, I don't remember who said it, but no plan survives contact with the enemy.
Mike Tyson says everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face.
Yes. But to go in without a plan is suicide. What would lead somebody to go into the future without a plan? Maybe that's the first question to ask before the dangers of failing to plan. What's the attitude behind failing to plan altogether?
Oh, God will take care of all of this, I don't have to do anything, it's not gonna require anything on my part.
Okay, so there might be, on the one hand, there might be almost an apathy towards God. And that's, failing, especially in verse 17, knowing the right thing to do. Well, God will handle it. That's the Jesus Take the Wheel. I hate that song, by the way. To just say, all right, Jesus, you do it. You're in control. I'm just going to sit back and enjoy the ride. No, God has called you to do something. God has called you to steer the car.
When I think about it, even like for us as a farming family, like Brett has to be out there and plant, whatever crop it is that he's putting out there. If he doesn't do it, nothing is going to grow. And so we can't just say, oh, God's got this. Brett doesn't have to go out and plant anything. Stuff will just come up. It'll just happen. It's kind of that mentality of like we can't be lazy.
Yeah.
We have to actually, God's given us the ability to do something. We need to do it.
Not just the ability, but the command to do something. So it very well could be a laziness issue. Just an unwillingness to get up and do what you know you're supposed to do in planning for the future.
Hopelessness, like we just feel like there's no point
Yeah.
So you don't plan, don't wanna plan.
A hopelessness, why bother? And that shows, again, a failure to trust God. Why bother? Because God is going to do something. Well, what's he going to do? I don't know, but are we going to trust him?
We could also miss out on blessings that God has for us if we're careless in the way we're planning our finances or planning our work or planning our church. Whatever it is that we're failing to look to the future for, and we may miss out on some of the things that God has for us being careless.
Yeah, absolutely. To miss out on some of the blessings, whether that's material blessings or spiritual blessings, as Luke mentioned earlier with the relationships. If you cultivate with intentionality those relationships, it may present an opportunity to witness to somebody or to speak truth into their life that helps them to grow in Christ. So both the physical, material blessings and the spiritual blessings that come with that, when we're willing to put intentionality in planning for the future and to get up and get the work done. And when we don't get those material blessings, we end up bitter, resentful. God, why are you giving it to them and not to me? And right alongside the patent quote should be the Benjamin Franklin, God helps those who help themselves. Well, that's not entirely true, but there's truth to it.
In the Big Kids Sunday School class, we're talking about our responsibility, that our faith, just like we talked about earlier in James, how God has prepared good works for us to do, and we're called to do them. So if we're just standing idly by and not doing the things God has for us, then it's part of the proof of our faith that we're working for God.
Yeah.
I suppose we just need to be careful that our plans are aligned with God, because we can get really wrapped up in our plans that we think are good plans.
Yeah. Well, and that's where, and I mean, it goes into the third question. How does knowing our limitations, as James pointed them out here, the fact that we don't know tomorrow, and that we are just a vapor, help us to glorify God all the more, specifically in this idea of planning for the future?
Well, every spring, like Tom say, right, carefully select which variety of crop is going on which field and how much fertilizer goes in each field. And usually, by the second or third day of planting, that plan has been drastically altered. But you just go in knowing that things aren't going to go according to plan. It's the same way, just being willing to accept God's interventions in those plans, and that, like a few people said, we just can't be so tied to those plans that it completely ruins us when we grow from it.
Yeah. The pride that might be in there saying, no, I have to stick to this no matter what. This is what I said, so this is what I'm going to do, and then you end up planting the wrong thing in the wrong field, and it ruins you later on. Recognizing, I have a plan, but I will change as God makes changes for me. How else does knowing our limitations help us to glorify God a little more as we're serving and planning for the future?
Maybe knowing when to rely on others, lean on it. I mean, listening to the church, I don't know what they were called, fundamentals, foundations, or something like that. You know, the mailing makes you realize that God gave you a village for a reason. you know, why not use it? He set it there for you, whether it's, you know, emotionally, spiritually, financially, you know, say that his doohickey thing broke down. Well, there's other people in church that could lend a hand, you know, and probably would be willing to. Or I don't know anything about farming, but hey, I can take the kids. You know, there's a village here, so maybe God put things in our way, not necessarily to mess up our plans, but to maybe have us rely more on our church family.
Yeah, absolutely. Seeing our own limitations and the way that God has equipped the family of believers that we're a part of to come alongside. So, and whether that's in physically helping or in seeking wisdom, to look, all right, this is what I'm looking at. These are my plans for the future. I can't see everything. Help me to see what I'm missing. And to get that outside perspective. Absolutely.
I think sometimes we make plans that we think are really great, and then God gets involved and makes them even better. And then we can see how great He is and how limited we are.
Yeah.
Even though we thought what we had planned was so great. If we allow Him to change those plans and realize His plan is better.
Yeah.
I think we also can have more patience for other people too, because their plan that they made, it didn't work out, that we were relying on it to work out. You know, to give us the opportunity to extend grace to them, so we don't have to be so upset with the other man. So.
Fair enough. Being able to extend grace to other people when their plans don't work out. One of the things that this brought to mind this week, and I was told some years ago, when struggling with continuing in ministry, there's a point that was made that burnout only happens to those who are frustrated with how things are turning out. Burnout only happens when things are not going as planned. People are willing to throw themselves behind to give their all when the rewards are worth it, right? So when the plan is this happens and this happens and this happens and I'm going to work towards it and I'm going to burn the candle at both ends, and as things are working out as planned, you can do that all day long. But when you work that hard and things aren't going as planned, that's when burnout comes in. That's when you say, all right, I can't work that hard anymore. Things aren't turning out as I wanted them to. And that's not about how hard you're working or how bad you want something. That's about a commitment to an outcome. And when that plan fails, that's when burnout happens. And what should that show us? When we're thinking about our limitations, that we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring, that we are just a vapor, it helps us to put things into perspective. I can work that hard to glorify God because today that is what He has called me to. And tomorrow, I'm going to keep working hard no matter what the outcome is. Because I don't know what tomorrow will bring. Maybe everything will come to fruition, maybe not. But also being a vapor that's here one day and gone the next. God's story will continue. And that's the only one that matters. God's eternal plans are what matter, not my momentary ones. And so we can serve day by day with the same level of conviction, the same level of desires when we recognize those limitations. And serving without getting burnt out. Because things aren't turning out how we wanted them to. Any other thoughts, questions?